This is your story.
It's as if we are being locked behind a wall built from pornographic elements, trapped in a kind of zoo where the exhibits are human, and the trap is set so masterfully that, after exposing people to deliberately designed erotic attacks meant to increase screen time and manipulate consumption behaviors, the very same individuals are shamelessly judged once they become addicted. This is not a conscious choice we make. It is a stimulus so powerfully engineered, so insidiously crafted, that most people simply cannot resist. The mind is captured without even noticing, and at some point, addiction to this content becomes an almost inevitable outcome. Today, a vast portion of our screens is saturated with overt and covert pornographic content. This is not a natural consequence of modern life. It is a carefully distributed toxin, and we seem to have slowly become accustomed to drinking it. Doesn't it also make you feel humiliated in a quiet, subtle way? Contrary to popular belief, it is not the explicit content we choose to view that is most damaging. It's the erotic stimuli we are exposed to without ever realizing it. Porn addiction is not just about sexuality. In fact, it is the exploitation of one of the brain's most fundamental circuits, the reward system. When the human brain perceives something as beneficial, it releases dopamine. And dopamine is not only about pleasure, it's also about learning, bonding, and motivation. It's the chemical messenger that says, that was good. But porn is one of the fastest ways to hack this system. Rapidly shifting images, artificially amplified stimulation, the illusion of unlimited partners, they all send a signal to the brain that says, this is an evolutionary jackpot, take more. And that's exactly where the system begins to collapse. Dr. Anna Lemcheff of Stanford University explains it this way. The more we are exposed to high dopamine stimuli, the more our baseline dopamine levels drop. In other words, the brain begins to feed not on real connection, but on fast, artificial rewards. As neurosurgeon Dr. Donald Hilton describes, pornography is a supernormal stimulus that impacts the brain's reward system far more deeply than natural stimuli. The brain drifts away from real connection and instead chases artificial gratification. It's like eating something overly sweet. The first bite brings a rush of pleasure, followed by a blood sugar crash. Porn addiction is a kind of mental hypoglycemia. It tricks the brain for a moment, but in the long term, it numbs everything. What's worse is that this constant stimulation dulls the brain's dopamine receptors. Over time, the same stimulus produces less and less effect. This leads to more frequent viewing, a search for more extreme content, and longer periods of consumption. It becomes a vicious cycle. And this cycle doesn't just deplete sexual energy, it drains emotional capacity as well. Because the human mind gradually loses its ability to distinguish between false connection and real intimacy. Eventually, the complexity, depth, and empathy found in an authentic relationship start to feel too slow, too meaningful, too real for the brain to handle, right? We begin to alienate ourselves from what is most human. We'll explore this in more detail shortly. This is why porn addiction isn't merely a habit. It is a case of neuroplasticity gone in the wrong direction, a learned pathway in the brain that begins to work against the person who formed it. And sadly, this often happens without anyone noticing, until one day they find themselves lost in a state of emptiness, dissatisfaction, and disconnection from meaning. Most people see porn addiction as a weakness of will, as if someone strong enough could just choose to walk away from it. But the truth is far more complex. This is not simply a behavioral issue. It is, more often than not, a way of coping with a suppressed emotional void. When our brain encounters uncomfortable emotions, it doesn't always choose to process them. Instead, it may look for escape. And if, in that moment, a quick relief is within reach, whatever it may be, it moves toward it. This is exactly where porn enters the picture. To suppress emotional pain, avoid intimacy, or silence the feeling of being unseen, just for a while. When you feel unworthy, when looking into someone's eyes makes you uneasy, when intimacy feels dangerous or suffocating, the brain offers a simple solution. Avoid connection, but keep the pleasure, okay? And one of the easiest places to do that is through fast, accessible digital stimuli like porn. Because forming a relationship with a real person requires effort, vulnerability, emotional openness, but a relationship with a screen.
Don't forget to subscribe.
that's effortless. And often it shields the brain from recalling past disappointments or rejections. Trauma expert Dr. Gabor Mate explains it this way. Addiction is not about pleasure. It's about pain relief. It's about trying to escape emotional suffering, even when the escape creates more pain in the long run. So the person isn't chasing pleasure, they're chasing relief. And when that relief is temporary, it is sought again. Like any repeated behavior, it eventually forms a habit and then an addiction. In neuroscience, this is known as escape behavior. Instead of facing emotions, the individual diverts attention elsewhere, sometimes through food, sometimes through social media, and sometimes through porn. The dangerous part is this. Each time the person escapes, the brain learns to favor that path. And over time, habits reshape neural circuits. Let me explain this with a simple example. Imagine a child. Whenever they're hurt, someone gives them a piece of candy to make the pain go away. Eventually, that child doesn't learn how to feel the pain, only how to solve it with candy. So they don't process emotions. They suppress them. Years later, that child grows into an adult, and when they feel pain, they reach for another kind of candy. Maybe a screen. Maybe false intimacy. Maybe just a few minutes of forgetting. And the impact of this addiction is not just mental. It affects how a person forms relationships, their emotional resilience, even their sense of self-worth. Because the places the brain retreats to over and over again eventually make real life feel threatening. And the worst part, even when someone wants love, they no longer trust it. This is the part I need you to remember. Porn addiction is not a sign of moral failure. It's the temporary collapse of a system that was never taught how to carry emotional weight. And that system can be rebuilt with love, with knowledge, and with support. The last thing I want to leave you with is this. Porn addiction is like wrapping yourself in a blanket on a cold night, but one that never actually warms you. It gives the illusion of comfort, but by morning, you're still freezing because it was never real warmth, and now it's time you remembered what real warmth feels like. Addictions are not just emotional, they are neurobiological, okay? Every time we repeat a behavior, the brain doesn't just reinforce that action, it reshapes itself. One of the most affected systems in porn addiction is the dopamine circuit. I've mentioned that dopamine is linked to reward, motivation, and anticipation. But it also plays a central role in learning. The brain asks a simple question. Did this feel good? Should I do it again? And if the answer keeps being yes, the brain wires that behavior into a habit. But here's the problem. With constant artificial dopamine spikes, the brain tries to protect itself. Its receptors, the parts that receive dopamine, begin to lose sensitivity. That means you need more to feel the same. More stimulation, longer duration, more extreme content. But ultimately, it all brings less pleasure. And not just less pleasure, but less motivation. Because dopamine isn't just about feeling good, it's what drives you forward, okay? That's why many people struggling with porn addiction also report apathy, low energy, and a deep sense of inner emptiness. Even real accomplishments start to feel hollow. The system is miscalibrated, right? This process affects the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for judgment, self-control, and long-term planning, which explains why people often do what they say they won't, right? They want to stop, but they cannot. Because by then, it's no longer just desire. It's a neural pattern. A study at Cambridge University using MRI scans found that the ventral striatum, the brain's reward center in individuals with porn addiction, showed the same activity as that of drug addicts. The brain starts to treat the behavior as a survival strategy, and the brain is loyal to anything it believes will help it survive. That's why I say porn addiction is not overcome through willpower alone. It must be rewired. You can't simply say stop, because the behavior is already carved into the brain. But here's the good news. If the brain can change, it can also learn again. Neuroplasticity works both ways, not just to form addiction, but to support healing. It is possible to reset your dopamine system, to redefine pleasure, to reconnect with what's real. This isn't the end. It's the beginning of something new. You just have to teach your brain again. And that begins with a choice. Porn addiction isn't just a behavioral loop. Over time, it reshapes a person's emotional map, capacity for connection, and even their sense of self. Many people who continue in this cycle report growing feelings of loneliness, numbness, and disconnection. Because when the brain is constantly exposed to artificial stimulation, real-life interactions start to feel inadequate. The warmth of a partner, the depth of eye contact, the subtlety of skin-to-skin connection. To a mind accustomed to artificial triggers, these experiences seem too slow, too real, too complicated. So the mind chooses what's easy. But easy is never fulfilling. This is why many experience anxiety, depression, low self-worth, and even a loss of reality. On the outside, they may look fine, but on the inside, it feels like a part of their mind is still stuck, looping through a cycle of unfinished pleasure. As Dr. Patrick Carnase puts it, addiction distorts intimacy. It replaces real connection with a ritualized illusion. And over time, the brain forgets how to bond with reality. So even if someone knows they're worthy of love, they may not feel it. There's a fog inside them because the artificial doesn't just numb the body, it numbs the soul. And addiction becomes more than a habit. It becomes part of their identity. A 2021 study published in Frontiers in Psychology found a direct link between regular porn consumption and higher levels of depression, social anxiety, and reduced self-compassion. So no, this is not merely a moral issue. This is a shift in psychological balance. And until that balance is restored, a person can feel utterly alone. Even while looking into someone else's eyes, some people even experience panic when trying to get close to a partner, because a real person involves uncertainty, vulnerability, and emotional investment. But a screen, it asks for nothing. It demands nothing, but it gives nothing too. Okay? And that's what hurts the most. You feel like something is happening, but in reality, you're not touching anything at all. This is why porn addiction isn't just a habit of consumption. It's also a symptom of a broken attachment system. The first, and perhaps the hardest step in healing, is facing yourself. But this confrontation should not be an interrogation. It should be a form of listening, not why am I like this? But instead, what do I need right now? Because judgment shuts the mind down, but awareness opens it. Most addictions are like armor, a protective layer over the most vulnerable parts of us. And you can't rip that armor off through judgment, but if you touch the wound underneath with compassion, that armor begins to dissolve on its own. Instead of saying, I did it again, I'm weak, try asking, why did I feel so lonely today that I turned to this? That simple shift opens the door to transformation.
Don't forget to subscribe.
Clinical psychologist Kristin Neff puts it like this: self-compassion is not a weakness. It is the most mature expression of emotional courage. Even the behaviors that harm you can be transformed if you understand why they exist. And this transformation begins with small moments of recognition. The next time you feel a trigger, pause just for a second before you act and ask yourself, what do I really need right now? That one question moves you from automatic reactions to conscious choices, because you can change what you're aware of, but you will keep repeating what you never notice. That's why the first step is to build a practice of non-judgmental awareness, not by beating yourself up, and not by pretending everything is fine, but by standing in front of yourself honestly, without shame and without lies. Addictions are fueled not only by emotional voids, but also by neurochemical imbalances, most notably, distortions in the dopamine system. When you keep triggering dopamine artificially, your brain gradually becomes desensitized to the signal. Eventually, you need more to feel the same. It's like listening to loud music. At first, it's powerful, but over time, your ears adapt, and you have to turn up the volume just to feel it again. Dr. Andrew Huberman of Stanford University explains, the most powerful effect of dopamine is not at the moment of reward, but in the anticipation that precedes it. If you expose yourself to intense dopamine sources every day, the system begins to crash. You lose your ability to enjoy simple things. That's why a dopamine reset is not just a digital detox. It's an attempt to recalibrate your brain's reward system, and it starts by asking yourself this question regularly. Are the things that feel good today truly nourishing me, or just distracting me? Begin by cutting down on fast rewards in your daily life. Endless video watching, jumping from tab to tab, constant notifications, sugary snackies, mindless scrolling on social media. These things feed your dopamine, but they don't feed your soul. Instead, rediscover natural dopamine sources. Take a walk without your phone, sit in silence, and just listen to music. Have deep, joyful conversations with friends. Read a book purely for pleasure. Stare at a tree without doing anything else. Paint something, pray, cook with presence. These are slow pleasures, and the truth is, real joy almost always arrives slowly. A dopamine detox isn't just about quitting. It's about making space, okay? So that your real self, your feelings, your values, your awareness has somewhere to return. If you want to transform a habit, you cannot just try to quit it. You have to try to understand it, because behind most addictions lies a kind of emptiness, not just physical or behavioral, but emotional. The real question is, what are you using to fill that space? And more importantly, what was missing in the first place that made that space so vulnerable? Porn addiction is often not the voice of a desire, but of a feeling. It carries a message. But when that message is ignored or silenced, only the behavior remains. And the behavior, over time, becomes automatic. That's why you must ask yourself, what was I really feeling when I reached for this? Maybe it was loneliness, maybe a sense of worthlessness, maybe the aching feeling of not being seen. And perhaps none of those feelings were ever fully acknowledged or understood, not even once. Psychiatrist Dr. Bessel van der Kolk writes, when emotions are suppressed, the body speaks. But when we reconnect with our emotions, both the mind and the body begin to heal. Because to face your feelings is not to fight them. To face them is simply to recognize what is there, and what is recognized no longer needs to feel dangerous. So in this step, the goal isn't just to stop the behavior, but to discover what might take its place. What was this behavior giving you? For how many minutes was it distracting you from what you did not want to feel? And what healthy alternative can you choose instead? For some, the answer might be therapy. For others, it might be art or prayer. For some, it could be the quiet presence of a friend. What matters is that you recognize the void and choose to fill it not with escape, but with something real. Because emotions cannot be transformed if they are never allowed to pass through. But when you are willing to look at them, you may begin to realize they didn't come to destroy you. They came to guide you. And that is the quietest yet most radical step in healing. If you are able to talk this openly about this topic today, know this. Something inside you already wants to heal. And that is not a flaw. It is a call to awareness. Because you are not broken. You are not dark, damaged, or beyond repair. Your brain has simply learned something. But that same brain also has the power to learn again. This capacity is called neuroplasticity. The brain does not just store what has happened. It can reshape itself based on what you choose next. Dr. Norman Doidge once wrote, when the brain changes, the self changes. Because what we call the mind follows the path the brain takes. Your mind may have gotten caught in a dark loop, but that loop was not a path. It was just a temporary pattern. And every pattern can be replaced by a new choice. You can remember what it feels like to connect deeply, to be loved, to be touched, to be seen, to be fully human again. A relationship built not on pleasure alone, but on meaning can be rebuilt, right? And this is a process of beginning again, like a sky that forgets the night as the sun rises, like a body that takes a deep breath for the first time in years. This process calls back the lost pieces of who you are, not just from an old habit, but from a disconnection with yourself. Every new beginning is a kind of inner revolution, because this time, you are not returning just to survive. You are returning to truly live. Thank you for listening. Beautiful soul. The comment section is your space. I would love to hear what this brought up for you. If you'd like to see more, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. Until we meet again, take good care of yourself.